If you've seen my videos or know me, it's no surprise that I don't like exploration or open worlds in RPGs because there's usually still an intended order of areas, upgrades, and bosses. I usually feel I'm being punished if I do the right thing at the wrong time, whether that punishment comes in the form of being overleveled or underleveled for certain areas and enemies, or hitting a dead end because I don't have the right upgrade. All of the frustrations I have with open world games can be solved by posting signs for where I'm supposed to go, but that would completely ruin the immersion of the game, so the only advice I can give to a developer is to make your open world game linear, or to someone playing such a game is to look up the popular order of areas. Full transparency. I do that all the time, for all the reasons I stated earlier, but also because my time is limited, and I like to minimize downtime and time spent retracing my steps. That may ruin the surprise for many, but I'm in the minority of people for whom spoilers don't really affect my enjoyment of a game or a movie. It's not what a piece of media is building towards that interests me as much as the how, and maybe it brings into question my ability as a critiquer. Criticast? Critter. No, that's what Hollow Knight is about. Critic. That being said, exploration in Metroidvanias does not offend me nearly as much as most open-world games. I think the two-dimensional world makes the openness more palatable, probably because my options are limited to choosing between moving up, down, left, or right. And usually I came from one of those directions, so my options are further limited to just 3. And every room doesn't necessarily have 4 exits, so that number can be limited to even just 2 or 1, if I'm lucky. I also like having a clear goal at any given moment in a game, more so on a what are my immediate next steps basis, and less so on a what are all these steps leading to basis, since that's likely to evolve and change over the course of a game. Like linear games, Metroidvanias can afford to be obtuse about your overall goals, since they funnel you down a relatively straightforward path with some branching routes along the way. Blasphemous is a great example of this because there's initially 3 forks in the road that lead you to 3 separate parts of the map, each with their own boss to cap them off. Following their defeat, you unlock a central path that also forks into 3 areas with 3 bosses, after which you have a straight shot to the final boss and the ending. If you've played Hollow Knight, this formula might sound familiar to you. There are also 3 main bosses, each in their own section of the map whom you have to defeat, and after that you can go straight to the final boss to complete the game. This final boss isn't in a new area that opens up, in fact he's in one of the first rooms you enter early in the game. I bring this up as an example of how interwoven and tightly packed Hollow Knight's world is. This can be annoying sometimes, and a triumph at other times, like when you entered this area where bodies are dropping on the platforms around you. If you climb up, you can make your way to a coliseum where the floor grates open to drop and dispose of the corpses of defeated fighters. Or in the City of Tears where it's always raining, zoom out of the map and you'll notice a giant lake right above it. That's not rain, that's drain, water. In Hollow Knight, it's much easier to get lost and spend hours wandering around. For many, this exploration is one of Hollow Knight's biggest draws, and I understand why, but for me personally, it's taxing and boring. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with all the options for where to go next, coupled with the fact that your map doesn't automatically update every time you enter a new room, or keep track of any of your progress, or mark something you found but couldn't reach yet, which is why I opted to play with a map on a second screen with all the upgrades, chests, bosses, and NPCs clearly marked. I picked something to work towards, worked it, and made consistent progress every time I played. Don't get your pitchforks out just yet. In my defense, this wasn't my first choice. I played a few hours of Hollow Knight a year ago and dropped it. Its opening hours are easily the weakest part of the game since it offered very little to keep me engaged. The introductory cutscene is obtuse in typical Souls-like convention, but not captivatingly so. The background environments are detailed and pretty, but not uniquely stylish. The first enemy is a tiny grub and poses no threat unless you walk into it. The first character you meet, Elderbug, is cute and probably the most attractive thing about Hollow Knight in the very early game since he cements the game's character art style. It's clear that exploration is as much of a focus in Hollow Knight as its combat, and I have to give the healing system that subsidizes both of these its flowers because it might be my favorite healing system in any game ever. Instead of a red, green, and blue bar for health, stamina, and mana, you have a row of masks that serve as HP and a soul meter that serves as a mana meter. Hitting any enemy with an attack gives you soul and gradually fills up the soul meter, which can then be partly consumed to either heal a mask's worth of HP or expelled in the form of one of 3 spells in the game. It should be apparent that this theoretically allows a player to never feel the need to find a bonfire or bench to refill on any resource, particularly because there are no limited heals that only replenish when you rest. Mid-combat, this infinite source of healing is balanced by the fact that healing briefly renders you immobile and thus susceptible to incoming attacks that can knock you out of the healing animation, wasting the soul you drained and worse, leaving you with less HP than if you hadn't attempted to heal and had dodged the attack instead. If you do manage to pull off the heal animation but still get hit, then the damage you healed and were just dealt cancel out, but leave you with less soul to heal with.
It's a positive feedback loop. The less you get hit, the more soul you can save up and use for spells to deal extra damage and finish boss fights faster. But the more you get hit, the more you put yourself at risk for taking more damage if you stop to heal, and the less soul you have to spare for spells, resulting in a longer, drawn-out boss fight. Since we're on the subject of boss fights, there are 47 bosses in Hollow Knight, 35 not including variations and dream versions, but really they boil down to two types, the kind that floats in the air and the earthbound kind. Depending on what type they are, bosses typically share a large portion of their generally small moveset. Bosses that float typically shoot projectiles at you in the form of balls or nails. Sometimes they will be the ball and bounce around the screen. Terrestrial bosses also share movesets, though less so than ghost-type bosses. Most have a dash and slash move, and many have a slam that sends out shockwaves. Movesets across both types aren't mutually exclusive. A ground-type boss can bounce around, for example. I understand that in a two-dimensional environment, there are only so many ways to harm the player, but that's precisely why I think there should have been fewer bosses in the game with a wider range of moves instead of a lot of bosses with only a few moves each. I also think that a lot of bosses would benefit greatly from simply swapping the sprite of their projectiles with a unique sprite that looks and sounds different, like this floaty boss who wields a hovering scythe. Even though the mechanics of the fight are largely similar to other bosses, the visuals are fresh enough to make the boss feel memorable and not like it's a rehash of something I've faced before. Anything to make a boss fight stand out more is a positive change, in my opinion.
Like most Metroidvanias, leveling up is not a mechanic that exists in the gameplay loop of Hollow Knight. Although enemies do drop currency called Geo, additional HP and upgrades for your soul meter, nail, and movement are carefully strewn about the world and must be found, fought for, or otherwise collected. Although this is a Metroidvania staple, it leaves no way for the player to express themselves through a build, if not for the charm system. Almost every charm has some use case, allowing you make a build favoring mobility, damage, spells, health, or a mix. No notes, except the currency that I mentioned earlier, Geo, is rendered largely useless towards the final third or quarter of the game. Far too early in my opinion. Even if you were exploring with a full soul meter, fighting enemies was always worth it because of Geo, no matter how little was dropped. In other games, this would be used to restock ammunition, buy equipment or clothing, or even used to level up. After you buy every charm and item possible, that impetus is removed and Geo is completely useless. If you settle on a charm build halfway through that works all around for you as well, then the situation is made even worse because you're just spending Geo mindlessly to get rid of it. I think a system where you can upgrade your charms with Geo to higher tiers would add some meat on the charm system bone. That's about everything I have to say about Hollow Knight, so I'll use this space to mention that it's made by a tiny team, just 3 people, and it priced at just $15 at MRP or $6 during sales. That quantity and quality to cost ratio alone makes this a great product, and my product review ends there, although I stand by the nitpicks I made when judging it as a piece of art through the lens of a critter.